All right, welcome everybody to another episode of Techno Dad Unfiltered. We got a full house today. We've got Marc Fishman, Tim Kimmel, and Nick Matzke. Am I saying your last name right? Matzke?
Yep, Matzke. Yep, that's
All
it.
right, cool. You guys, notably, Mark works on the Atmos mix for The Last of Us and Fury. Tim, Game of Thrones. You know, all the audio for not all the audio. Well, audio. I don't know 100%. And then, Nick,
I did not mix it. Supervising Sound Editor.
Supervising Sound Editor.
Right.
Nick, mastering engineer, Atmos mixer. He's got a YouTube channel. Check out his channel down in the comments below. Let's start off with okay, Tim, you already started. Go ahead and tell him who you are and what you do.
Okay. My name is Tim Kimmel, Supervising Sound Editor. As you mentioned, Game of Thrones, which is one of the bigger shows I worked on, but most recently for HBO, Sympathizer, for Netflix, Avatar, Last Airbender, and Three Body Problem, which Mark mixed, as well as Sympathizer. Yeah, I mean, these guys are more on the mix side. I'm more on the sound editorial side on what gets the material to them.
All right. Go ahead, Mark.
I am Marc Fishman. I'm a re-recording mixer, and we'll talk a little bit more about exactly what I do. But yeah, I've been doing this for about 33 years. Worked on a variety of film and television projects, and yeah, that's me. And again, we can after the introductions, I think we can discuss a little bit more in detail what Tim and I do separately and differently and all that stuff.
All right, Nick.
Yeah, I do not have the awesome credits that those guys have, but I've been a professional musician for over 20 years. I'm a guitar player. That's where I make most of my living, but I'm also a mixing and mastering engineer, and I've been doing that for about 20 years professionally. And I just in the last about year or so just got into mixing Atmos. Been into home theater probably about that same amount of time. So I'm a big home theater enthusiast like Chana. So when I got the chance to start mixing in Dolby Atmos, it was kind of an intersection of those two things. So it was something I was very excited about. So
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, since I started doing that, man, I was like, wait a second, I know how to do this. I can pan stuff left, right, up and down. Let's do it. Let's go. A funny thing was like I never knew how to use Pro Tools, and so I got everything, and I was like, man, I even got like the Pro Tools, whatever the like yearly license, and I was like, I open up the session, I'm like, fuck, this, I have no idea what I'm doing.
I've been using it, man, since like 2004, so it's like second nature. And I think anybody that works, whatever DAW you've been doing, it's just like, you just stick with that. I mean, all the DAWs are equally as good, but I mean, Pro Tools is the industry standard. And then it's just kind of like whatever one you grow up getting comfortable with, that's the one you use because you're just like second nature.
No, I totally lucked out. I've been using Logic since before Apple bought them. And then the newest update had an integrated Atmos render. I was like, oh, and then I started messing around with it, and I just love it. I really, and I know my viewers, they know, like, I just want to make some cool shit, and I want to make sure that I got sounds flying around everywhere, and Mark, do you want to make cool shit? Like that's.
He has made some very cool shit. I've listened to his shit and it's reference stuff.
Yes.
Mark has done. So
no, I think it's fun. I mean, I think that it's a little different talking between music and filmed linear entertainment. We're a little more tied to things obviously on the screen, but I mean, I've been involved with Dolby and Atmos since kind of the inception of it. And I think it's been an interesting tool. And I think one of the things that we've seen, I know it's hard sometimes for home theater enthusiasts and stuff to see, but it's given us a better tool set. And even in the stuff that's not necessarily, the big wow Atmos stuff, we can really see the benefit in 5.1 mixes and in stereo and the amount of headroom we end up having. It became a really interesting thing when we, expanded our plate. And again, Tim and I can talk a little bit more about exactly what from the editorial side has changed with Atmos and all that. But yeah, we always want to do, cool stuff that serves the story. And I think, you know, we've been really lucky, and now it's pretty ubiquitous, obviously, on all the streaming platforms, and even the stuff we're doing for network. We're doing shows for NBC. They're doing everything in Atmos and all this other stuff. So we've been doing, you know, a lot of different stuff.
NBC is making shows in Atmos.
Yeah, I think most everybody, well, because the primary platform for those people aren't necessarily NBC. So it might be an NBC show that's a co-production with Lionsgate or with Hulu or with anybody. So a lot of times the delivery specs are what those people want down the line. That's necessarily what NBC or CBS or ABC are going to broadcast.
Very cool. Very cool. So we touched on it a second ago. What is a re-recording mixer?
Well, I'll give you that answer, but let me, and Tim, is it all right if I kind of explain what you do a little bit?
Sure, of course.
Okay, so you know, the parts of the production process for any filmed entertainment is they obviously go and they shoot, and they record sound on the set, they record the dialogue, and they do all that, and then they put it together in the editing room. And Tim's job as a supervising sound editor is to take the sound that was recorded on the set, to take any dialogue that we need to redo after the fact, which is called ADR, which stands for automatic dialogue replacement. We have to redo all the voices in the background, because when they're shooting on the set, nobody in the background can talk. So we call that walla, because that used to be what it sounded like, is walla, 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 the background voices. But if you're watching a scene in a restaurant, only the 2 or 3 main characters, anybody who's a principal actor is talking, everybody else in the background is silent. And so,
oh, really?
Oh, yes.
That's all just added later. Okay.
There are 1 or 2 kind of famous exceptions in a couple movies, but yes, that's all done. And so Tim and his team will go in with a bunch, maybe 8 to 10 to 12 to 16 actors, and they'll pick all the people in the background and they'll record those specific lines. And then there's a process called Foley. And once again, the microphone, when they're doing production, picks up a lot of sound, but doesn't always pick up everything. And a second really big part of our process is when we have to go do foreign dubs, we have to take out anything that was recorded on the set. So all those sounds go away. So I'm talking about they replace and redo every footstep of every person in the background, people walking by. We call, for the most part, Foley or human sound. So if somebody puts down a cup, the cup makes a sound, or somebody takes a drink, there's a myriad of anything. I always tell people, if you watch a show on any of these, you know, you can go watch a show on HBO and put the Spanish track on, and you'll hear everything besides the dialogue was all done by the sound editing team and the Foley artists and all that. There's background sound effects, which are airs and ambiances and traffics and birds and all that stuff. And then there's what are called hard sound effects, which would be cars and guns and doors, and again, a myriad of things that Tim and his team of sound recordists will go out. And we have a lot of library stuff that we've recorded over the years. We also sometimes have to go out and get a certain car for a certain show. I know, you know, Tim spent a lot of time on the Sympathizer. We had some period cars. We had a really throaty V8 car, and we spent a lot of time getting the right sounds for that. And then we have what's called sound design, which will be, you know, Tim, obviously dragons didn't exist for for Game of Thrones. So, you know, Tim has to go out and
Tim was the dragon sound, right?
Exactly.
Out there yelling into a microphone.
Yes, he doesn't have to go out and record them, but Tim is responsible working with a team of sound designers and having to design those sounds and kind of shepherd them through this. So what Tim does is he prepares everything that you hear in a soundtrack besides the music goes through Tim's hands with his team of people. And he might have 1 or 2 dialogue editors that just do the production sound and the ADR and the group walla. He might have 1 or 2 background editors that have to go cut all those ambient sounds we talked about. He has to have somebody edit the Foley, because these are people walking it in real time with the picture, and they're not perfectly frame and sync. And so he has to get it in sync with not only what was recorded on the set, so it doesn't flam when it's played back together. He has to do that, and then he'll have to cut in the sound design, and Tim kind of shepherds all that stuff. Tim is responsible for all that stuff. And again, we'll work with the sound designer and the creators, the directors or the showrunners throughout the whole process. Tim is on from the beginning of that. And so Tim is he's supervising sound editor because he's responsible for every sound that you hear coming out of the speakers. And Tim can talk a little bit more about that. So that's Tim's purview. What I do, it's called re-recording mixing. And why is it called re-recording mixing? Because I'm taking elements that were already recorded somewhere else and re-recording them into the final soundtrack. It's a kind of old term
Yeah, right.
that doesn't necessarily apply as much when we're thinking about having things in digital workstations and having virtual mixes, but that's just why that term stuck. And what we kind of, one of the really good analogies is that if we talk about a soundtrack of a show being a meal, Tim prepares all the ingredients and gets me everything I need, and Sue chefs it, so the sound design might be pre-mixed and all that stuff. And then I'm ultimately me. I do dialogue and music, and then I work with an effects partner that does all the other sounds, and we work together to balance and pan and work with Tim and the creatives to kind of bake that soundtrack that you finally hear. So that's kind of in a nutshell the two different worlds that we live in. And you know, Tim and Supervising Sound Editors have, like I said, they're kind of the shepherds of this throughout the whole process. They've spent the time, they know what's been asked for, and that's where a lot of the creative work happens. And I know we'll talk about this a little bit more in depth, but me and Tim and my other mixing partner and the music editor will spend a lot of time. We'll go through it and usually do our first pass and then present it to a client. They usually don't get into the nuts and bolts of what we're doing and how we're doing things. And we'll talk about this a little bit more as
they just want it done. They just want it done. They're like,
well, they
I
want
don't care
something
how
to
you
react
do
to. Correct. And somebody had a really great saying. They said, look, if it was a football game, our job is to get it to the 10-yard line, and the creatives is to get it over the, into the end zone. And sometimes they make us run back 90 yards the other way because we can completely mess it up, right? They can listen to it, but that's really a magic part of the mixing process, is sitting with the clients, sitting with the showrunners, working in real time, addressing their notes and talking about things. But we have a huge ability to do our creative thing before that. And again, like a lot of things to talk about, a lot of subjects to talk about. But one of the other things is that I think there's a lot of people that attribute this subjectively good mix to this studio or this, that, and the other. And in the end, you really have to look at the teams doing the work behind the scenes, because again, we'll talk about this, and there are some specific things that I'm going to say that don't necessarily follow everything. But in the end, the studios really don't have much of a say of what happens. They don't dictate what a mix sounds like. There are certain exceptions that we can discuss, but for the most part, in the end, it's always the showrunner and the creatives, and that could be on a film, it's a director, and broadcast, it's a showrunner / producer / creator. They're the ones that are ultimately responsible for that. And we'll talk about how that pertains to Atmos. I've talked enough, but I'll let Tim jump in. But that's the nuts and bolts of what I do, and I'll let Tim jump in.
Yeah, I mean, I think you said a good majority of it, but just kind of explaining more of the process of when I get started on it. The first step in it is, I will watch, say it's first episode of a television series. I will watch it, then I'll sit down with the showrunners, the creatives, and sit with them to watch it and get to know what they're looking for. We'll watch it in real time. I'll have questions already set up. What are you looking for in this scene? What are you looking for in that scene? Or they will just, depends on the showrunners. Other ones are just always talking, oh, I want more of this here. I want more of that here. Make this, this is supposed to be creepy. Let music take control in this. I know there's a lot of sound effects going on, but let music run this. Let music be the motion behind this. Or in this next scene, let music take a back seat. I want to hear that explosion. I want that to be in your face. Or this is an intimate scene. Pull everything back. I just want to hear them speaking. So I sit with the creatives, the showrunners, executive producers, and discuss with them what it is they're looking for in their soundtrack. And then
is that done by a scene by scene basis?
I mean, it depends. We sit down and we hit play, and sometimes it's you go until somebody says, oh, I got a question, or I have a comment, and other times it's let's watch a scene and discuss. It's a project to project. It depends on how the showrunners want to work. So some showrunners, they'll get pretty comfortable and trusting with us, where we're just watching, and I don't have to ask much, unless it's something confusing or different than what's normal in their series. And um, I've had showrunners that are sitting behind me playing Words with Friends against each other, um, while we're just watching it, and or they're making funny comments at their own show, making fun of their own show, where I have to then interject and say, "Well, yeah, but what about, what do you want in this scene? I'm having trouble understanding this dialogue. Is that bothering you guys? Or,
Mm.
what is this scene? Are you wanting to, we're outside. You want a lot of life outside? Are there a lot of birds? Are there distant animals, or are they more remote? What are you wanting to feel here? Are we near a city? That getting those kinds of details from them.
Mhm.
Yeah, and also intricate details of the mix. It's good to know ahead of time. Some showrunners and producers, they like their dialogue up front and really clear, while other ones want it kind of tucked back into everything. So trying to get that information from them, so that when we get to the mix, I can get that info to Mark and effects mixer, or whoever I'm working with, and let them know, like, if they haven't worked with this producer, hey, they really like their dialogue really clear and upfront. They
Mhm.
want to, let's make sure we carve room for that. Or they like the stuff tucked back, or they're music heavy on their likes here, or they're not, or they want stuff in your face, they want it more intimate. So getting to know the producers is a big part of my job. And then once I have all that information, as Mark said, I've got dialogue editor, ADR editor, ADR supervisor. Depends on the size of the you know
Right.
of the
So,
production. But
how many seasons of Game of Thrones did you work on?
I worked on seasons 3 through 8. So I started from season 3 to the finish.
So you pretty much, in that time got to kind of know what the showrunners wanted
Hmm.
and all that. I found this thing on Facebook of all places. So before I get into any of that, what is up to everybody in the chat? I see everybody from Van Gool to Reverend Slim, Marv, Carlos Cruz. I can't get into all your names, but Super Collector Clark, he had this question: how do you know you have enough sound effects for a film? And I found this thing on Facebook. I don't know where this video is from, but I'm going to put it up on screen here. And it says something like, Supervising Sound Editor Tim Kimmel explains how the 720 track sound mix of Game of Thrones battle scene. So just look, you guys,
Man.
at all of this. These are all just sound effects.
Sound effects, background, sound design. I'm sure these battle sequences. Look, our job is to make sure everything is covered. So when we get to the mix, if they want to hear something that they're seeing, it's covered. It's a lot easier to have something and mute it than it is to, at the last second, try and create
Hmm.
it.
Oh, sure, for sure.
So, and as you can see, kind of quickly on there, a lot of things had to get cut for perspective, so that when something's close and then cut to far away, bunch
Mhm.
of tracks and another set of bunch of tracks.
Oh, right.
Um,
I
so
actually had that question. That was
Mhm.
one of the things, because I know they changed they change camera angles so much. So like if you have like a lot of action going on the screen, let's say the POV is like you're above their like right shoulder, and yet there's all this commotion going on up in front of them, and then it switches to their face. Do you guys have to like flip the audio around, like to
I
give
mean,
that
generally we don't,
perspective,
because you
or?
you don't want it to be too bumpy. So it's, a lot of times things are cut for perspective in case we want to play it that way.
Mhm.
It's really kind of depends on the filmmakers, on what it is they're trying to accomplish. So, if you're, say it's a battle sequence and we're in the perspective of somebody watching the battle from a distance, and then the next cut is we're in the battle. Well,
Mhm.
yeah, you're gonna want to feel that shift. But if you're in a conversation where you're over one shoulder and then over another, it gets bumpy if you start feeling that perspective. So that's usually not, you're not going to feel
Okay.
that with what we do. But yeah, I mean, to answer, how do we know whether or not, you know, how much sound effects to have? I mean, the answer is, my job and my team's job is to cover it all, to make sure we've got everything, and then it's Mark and his effects mixers' job to kind of blend it. We'll try and put it into a rough place for them, but for them to blend it and figure out, okay, I know you've got all these sounds with this part of the battle, but if we put all that in there, it's a mess. So let's pull back these and let's focus on this one specific person we're looking at. Pull all the background stuff way back and focus on it. But we've got all that stuff there because what if you never know, the filmmakers
Did they
come
just
in and
change
say,
they change their mind? Like, like you like
Yeah.
half the episode's over, like finished, and you're like, we want to fix this part.
That's definitely
change it.
happened. I mean, we say to watch is to note. Every time you watch with producer, they'll have different notes, and sometimes it's minor, and sometimes it's say, you know what, I'm feeling different right now. Flip it. I know we were focusing on that and pushing that, but let's try pulling that back and pushing the music and see how that feels. So there's definitely some experimenting like that on the stage, and then they'll watch it again and say, yep, I was wrong. Go back to how we had it before. And Mark knows which showrunner I might be talking about on some of that,
Yeah.
but
Seems like the approach is to be very over prepared, though, like have everything that they could possibly need, so that like just come way over prepared, And I mean, Mark, when you like, as far as like, it's like thinking about 700 tracks as like a mix engineer is like an absolute nightmare, so like how much of that stuff when it gets to you, Mark, is like how much of that is bust down, grouped together, so it's in smaller chunks that you can work with everything, or is everything still at that individual? There's literally 700 individual tracks even when you're doing the mix session.
Well, it's done a little differently between sound effects and what I get. Everything that I deal with is always all split out. So I think on a show like Sympathizer, we had Tim? I think like 30, maybe 32 tracks just of production sound dialogue. And we were talking about perspectives, Jenna. It's still, if they shoot it a certain way and it goes back and forth, I'm going to have them on separate tracks because it was shot at different times of day. Right. The mic is going to be in a different place. So I have to be able, every angle, I need to be able to maybe equalize a little differently. One might have a little more reverb on it and all that. So it's still all prepared that way. And then it also does give me that ability if the showrunner says, when we're on the back, I want to hear this a little bit lower and all that. But it is a little different because Tim and the sound effects editors, they build in Pro Tools templates. And so what they might do is they might have 40 channels just of a car, and it will maybe be coming out a 5.1 output or a couple 5.1 outputs. And that way the effects mixer can go in and actually still deal with those individual elements. But the intersection between what's coming from editorial, there's some pre-mixing done on the sound effects side of things. That happens on the sound effects side of things because those sessions get very unwieldy, and some TV shows we only have a couple days to mix. So there's no hard fast answer, but in terms of dialogue,
of days to mix. Couple of days. Is there a lot going on in this show? Is it a 1 hour, 30-minute episode? What?
Well, they're different. So I've mixed a couple episodes of SWAT, and we had 2 days, right? We'd mix for a day and a half, and then they'd come in and do playback. And those shows have gone on for a long time. Everything's fairly well established. Mm-hmm. There's not a lot of new stuff. It doesn't reinvent the wheel every show. A show like Last of Us or The Sympathizer, or Tim can tell you on Avatar, 7 days to 10 days. And one of the things in films, we always get the opportunity, or mostly always get the opportunity to do what's called pre-mixing. So I might just come in for a week by myself and just prepare the dialogue and clean it up and get the EQs to match and pick out my reverbs and get the ADR to match. And we might do that for a week or 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. And then we might.
Here's a hot button topic, because I know a lot of my viewers were not so impressed with the Atmos mix for 007. God, what was it called? Something about dying. It was done in No Time to Die. No Time to Die. Atmos mix was done in 2 weeks. Is that normal for a feature film, like an action film? 2 weeks?
No, and I know that. Well, I have to say, I know that might have been what they did just for the home theater mix. I know those guys probably spent 2 to 2.5 months mixing that show. So maybe the dialogue mixer would have spent 2 weeks just doing the dialogue, and the sound effects mixer might have spent 3 weeks, and then they probably spent 4 to 5 weeks on the stage doing the final mix with all the music on those bigger kind of shows. It's kind of what we did on something like Power Rangers or Fury or, those kind of shows. We get a lot more time. Pro Tools has given us a lot more ability to do a lot more in a lot less time. But again,
So
some
these are
of
only
shows,
these are only like the near field mixes, or the that we're getting on like 4K discs that are just kind of getting rushed, as it were.
no, that's not a rush, because you have to remember, once a film is finished, right? At that
Mhm.
point, we have stems. So when we're mixing, we were talking about mixing these things down, and Nick said, "Okay, you've got these 700 tracks." Well, when we're mixing all those 700 sound effects tracks, all the sound effects will go into maybe a 9/1 bed for Atmos and maybe 15 objects. And then all the background's the same, and the same with the dialogue. It might just go into a 9/1 bed and a bunch of objects. So things are getting whittled down and whittled down. By the time we finish a film and they've signed off on the theatrical mix, it really is more mastering at that point, right? And that's what we would traditionally call mastering in music, where the mix is done and now we need to take it and prepare it for this different environment with a different EQ curve and different things. But yeah, that can take between a couple days to a week, and on some shows a couple weeks. But it's not rushing. I mean, occasionally they have you rush it, but that's not that difficult because you're not starting from scratch.
I see. Okay.
Can I ask, so like, because before we get to the, because I definitely have a couple like nerdy Atmos questions, but one thing kind of just pertaining to this conversation here. So, Mark, you're a re-recording mixer, and on a lot of, movies and shows, there's multiple re-recording mixers credited. So like, how does it work, when you're working with another person, and like, how is that split up? What's it like, working with another mixer? Because I mean, like on the, on the audio side, we're used to just doing the mix, always one person by ourselves. So it's kind of like hard to think about doing that like with another person. So what's that aspect like for you?
Well, traditionally, so what I say, old school Hollywood, kind of in the 80s and into the 90s, there were three mixers on Hollywood projects. There would be a dialogue music, a separate music mixer, and somebody that would handle all the sound effects. That now, it's very rare we have a third music mixer on a show. And in New York, they are still mostly doing one-man mixes. So New York had always been kind of a one-man show thing. I've only done a couple of those. Doing it with two people is amazing because I'm so focused on what I'm doing. It's good to have somebody else to bounce those things off of. And it's also really good for that other person too, because I'm then, when I can listen to what they're doing, they get focused. So it's just really having a good partner to bounce things off of. I mean, in the end, there's all the ideas are good ideas, right? So it's not that I have a say or that Tim has a say. We're just trying to get what the creatives, again, the showrunner or the director want. So it is great. And honestly, the other thing is, because we're listening at pretty loud levels, it's really good. I try at least 2 hours to get up and just leave for 10 or 15 minutes and give myself an air break and let somebody else work. And
for sure, reset your ears.
And it's expensive. It costs for us to mix a TV show, it costs between $700 and $800 an hour for us to be mixing there. And so for the clients, we want to be as efficient as possible. And so it makes a lot more sense to have two people.
Definitely. Yeah. You can like hit it in shifts, and, like you said, really nice to have. I mean, it's like, on the music side, you're working with a great producer or even a mixing engineer who, I always master my own stuff, but a mixing engineer who works with a mastering engineer you trust, to have somebody else that you can, another set of ears to hand something off to, be like, hey, I'm just so deep in the rabbit hole on this, like, give me a fresh set, a fresh approach. And that's where the break thing you said too, and you're doing anything yourself, anybody out there that's working on anything creative, give yourself a break, because just coming back with a fresh set of ears or fresh set of eyes is like some of the best. It'll be clear as day what you needed to do, something you've been stressing over for an hour.
100%. And we do get the when we're at the back end of a thing, when the clients kind of finally come in, it's usually the last day or two, and that's really where, you know, the sound of this car, Tim, we don't like this engine, so Tim's frantically in the background recutting new stuff, and the showrunner decides they want to pull the music out of a scene that I think I can say it to him. I think if anybody watched the Sympathizer at the beginning of episode 2, there was score all the way through, and at the last minute, we kind of decided we wanted to try the first half of the scene with no music, and so we had to very quickly come up with a way to kind of make a subjective thing. And so it was a lot of Tim, and I mixed that show with Danielle Dupree, very talented effects mixer, and Tim and I, the three of us, like, hey, how are we going to do this? And you know, and you have to do, it's very expensive. You're usually in overtime at that point at the end of a mix. And so I think that's where a lot of experience comes in. We've just done it 1,000 times. And so we just have to really go into autopilot mode and put on the thinking caps and figure out, and Tim will say, Mark, you know, try and get rid of this and that. And somebody else in the chat had asked about, you know, how do you know if you have enough sound? And then somebody said, well, if you have too much sound, and that's a bigger part of the mixing process too, is really what we have to get rid of, because when you start out mixing, you can see it on certain showrunners shows. They try and put everything in, and it's a mess. And so it's really knowing what to focus on. And Tim's amazing about that. You guys, you know, Mark, turn this off. You know, this might be the thing that's getting in your way or that. So it's a real hand-in-hand collaboration.
Yeah, but we do like what's sometimes called peaks and valleys pass of, you know, making sure of when to push stuff and when not to. And, you know, you kind of start out putting everything in, like he was saying, and then go in and figure out what works, what doesn't, what is getting in the way of making something clear, you know. And, you know, I try to know the tracks the best that I can so that I can let the mixers know, oh, you know, that what's cluttering up the low end is probably on that tracks 2, 3, and 4 on your, you know, effects B stem. Like, pull that back a little bit, or, you know, try to give them that kind of information when I can.
Right. I mean, I know one of the things that a lot of people in the home theater space struggle with is the, you know, dialogue intelligibility in some of these scenes, whether that's, you know, at the mixing stage, or there's just their AVR didn't really, you know, do the correction properly. I know that's
or they've got a bad room, or, you know, bad placement of their center. There's all sorts
bad
of
speaker.
Yeah,
you know, there's all sorts of variables. Jeremy has a question here. It says, is panning of dialogue out of the center channel to left and right becoming more common with Atmos, or is that just a stylistic choice regardless of format?
Regardless of format. I mean, I've always done it as much as I can. It's a thing where it's a weird thing, because sometimes, you know, we'll go through a show and then I'll watch something back and I'll be like, oh, I don't remember I panned that. But it's a thing where you kind of get in the zone and you're watching the show and you just watch something and you go like, oh, you know, you're watching somebody walk off camera and you have a quick conversation, or I have a quick conversation with myself about like, well, does this work? Is it going to be jarring when I come back? Is it going to do that? But I've always done it as much as I can. Sometimes you can't, because a couple characters might be tied together. Sometimes you can't. There's a myriad of different reasons why. But it didn't really, I didn't see it starting in my workflow just because of Atmos. I've always really tried to do that.
Yeah, well, I mean, didn't it go back to, I'm trying to remember right, but like, wasn't it one of the Pixar movies was like one of the first, like Toy Story or something, where they, you know, really had tried to, you know, move dialogue like into the surrounds and stuff sometimes, and that was like really frowned upon for years and years in Hollywood. Like, you never moved it away from the. Am I wrong? I don't know if I'm recalling the right story that I heard.
No, all the Pixar stuff. No, yes, all the Pixar stuff and all the animated stuff. Again, because you're never tied to anything, right? So again, part of the problem with production sometimes is I'm tied to the feet. And so I might be panning somebody off, but it might have this other character's feet on it. So sometimes there's just technical reasons. But, you know, Gary Rydstrom and Randy Tom and the people at Skywalker and, you know, Gary Rizzo's an amazing mixer up there. They have really, you know, to the nth degree, really done that kind of very hyper real panning thing, and it works for those things. You know, when you're thinking about doing it for a movie, you always have to be careful because the sweet spot is much lower. So if you're sitting off on the left channel, you know, you have to be careful. When you're, you know, you have to think about larger spaces and stuff sometimes.
Okay. Oh,
So
right.
the sweet spot is a little bit different, but it is a very cool style. There's just a lot of reasons why sometimes we can't do it with what I call, you know, filmed entertainment with production sound.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
That kind of like, so I don't know, John, if it's okay. Like there's like two main questions I kind of wanted, big picture questions I wanted to ask, you know, Marc about. And one of them is definitely, you know, more for the home theater audience. But it kind of just like what you were saying there. Like, so as far as your general approach to Atmos, and as far as like, I think what most home theater fans, you know, want to hear is like, you know, looking at like the stuff you've done, like I said, like Power Rangers or Carnival Row. Like you watch a show like that, and I just watched the first 5 minutes of Power Rangers today just to kind of, because I hadn't watched it in a while, just to refresh my memory. And there's just so much cool stuff just in the first 5 minutes,
Right.
you know?
Yeah.
And it's like, but I remember, you know, watching Carnival Row and thinking the same thing. Like, it's just the really obvious stuff. Like if someone is, you know, up, like standing above somebody talking to them, you know, you would put their dialogue like in the, you know, in the height speaker above you. Or if like something is flying down, you would have it come down from the height speaker, you know, like in Power Rangers, you have that really cool thing at the beginning, you know, where it starts out like it sounds like you're in that helmet, you know, from Zordon, and then it zooms out, kind of like the same thing they did in Gravity, you know, where, and then you zoom out of it. And then of course you got the you know,
ship overhead,
ship flying over, and then like that thing I just said, like Rita's like right above him talking, and you know, you can hear her dialogue above you. And it's like, I think that's what most home theater fans, you know, want when they listen to a home theater mix, is like, I mean, yes, everything is on the screen in front of us. So like in theory, yes, everything could be happening in front of us, but like, it's more like if something is just even a little bit above us on screen or behind us, we want it to be that place, you know, in the speakers. And like the stuff you've mixed, you know, Marc, it does exactly that. It does what I think most home theater fans want out of an Atmos mix. So like, I guess what is your general approach with that? How much of it is, you know, stuff you're going to try? How much of it is, you know, stuff where, you know, like Tim, you were saying before, like, well, I can't get too crazy. Cause I know like stuff with, you know, like Power Rangers, for example, the next scene after the opening is that cool thing where he's driving around in the car, and I know they shot it that way with it's a one shot, you know, with the camera moving, and the radio stays and tracks you all the way around the room, you know, in his car. And that's sort of, it was kind of made for something like that. But I feel like you have to decide, you know, when is it okay to do these more extreme things, and when do you have to keep it more grounded, so to say, you know, because I think as fans, most Atmos fans want things everywhere all the time. You know?
I mean, I think that the simplest answer is that the you know, the picture tells you what to do, right? So it's very rare. It's fairly rare that I get asked to do something like, oh, can we put that overhead? That's not it, because it's usually very obvious.
Yeah.
The more common thing is to undo something like that because it's distracting, or they don't like it, or it takes them out of the show. And so I can't, it sounds a little bit like a cop-out answer, but the show tells you what it wants, right? I mean, people ask me how loud I mix the dialogue. Well, it's like, because when it sounds like it's coming out of the character's mouth, right? It doesn't, you know, if I can't see them, and it has a feeling of, is it sitting on the screen? Is it sitting in front or behind? And it's the same thing with the Atmos stuff. I mean, you know, Tim and I, you know, on Sympathizer, we did a lot of really, what I think is really interesting bunch of scenes with like big rooms with reverb, and coming up with all these really intricate multi-channel reverbs in the overheads, and doing that with the music. And we've got helicopters and a whole scene with a big bombardment on the airfield. And so it just all seemed fairly obvious. And then the next question I think that will come up is,
why doesn't everybody do it, right? I mean, why don't the other mixers do it? Because like I said, you know, you're doing, like I said, Marc, the stuff you do is like exactly what people are wanting to happen. It's more like, why doesn't everyone else do that sort of thing too? You know,
I mean,
Or
the
what? I guess
answer
what's your
is-
best guess? As to why.
Well, I want to be politically correct. I want
Yes,
to be
without getting in trouble, without throwing anyone
No,
under
it's
the
not
bus.
trouble. No. I would say it, and I'm gonna let Tim give me maybe a little bit of shade, but yeah, it's just the way I mix, and it's the way other people mix, and it's just not. I have a style, and it's like if you go, it's a different between going to somebody like Mutt Lange or Bob Clearmountain, right? They're gonna have different styles, and they have different things.
Very much
And
so.
I think it's a lot more obvious now because people have access to these amazing setups at home. So the differences can be,
Pretty
they
drastic.
can be more obvious.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just, I can't, that's not me being disrespectful to other mixers. It's just, again, I get into these conversations with people and they say, well, there's this studio or that, or, the James Cameron stuff. And it's like, well, and I'm just gonna say, the James Cameron's movies are done by a very specific set of people that he's worked with for 20 years. And they have a very certain style of mixing their shows. The people that mix a lot of the Marvel shows have a very specific style and sound. And, and there are certain Marvel films that sound completely different than some of the other Marvel films. And that's just what their style is. And again, I know for home theater people, we spend a lot of money and a lot of time, and people really want to use this technology. And when you hear something that's really cool, you hear something like a Gravity that's like mind blowing and really cool. You go, you sit there and go like, why can't everything sound this way? And again, sometimes the story doesn't allow for it. Sometimes there are technical reasons because of the way the dialogue and other things were recorded. And sometimes it's people's taste and
or maybe we just can't have it all. We just can't have if we don't have something that's good or bad, we can't have something that's good, right? If everything's good, then it's just all kind of like
stands out more. Yeah.
I was just having this conversation about how words in the English vocabulary they've just been diluted. Like, there was a time everybody was using the word epic. Oh, this was epic. My lunch was epic. Really, dude? Was the Taco Bell taco really epic? Like, come on. Were you that hungry? So as we're talking about Atmos mixes, Fred has a great question here. Mark and Tim's favorite Atmos mix. You can't pick your own. Can't pick your own.
Or my ego's not that big. My ego's not that big yet.
How about favorite of your own and favorite by someone else?
Okay, there we go.
Tim, go for it.
No, you're supposed to go first because I'm sitting there thinking. I don't.
It's a tough one, huh?
Yeah.
Me on the spot.
Okay. How about this?
Yeah,
while you're thinking about that, Tim, do you have an Atmos system at home, like a consumer level one?
I do not.
Okay.
I do not. Yeah, I really, in order to enjoy Atmos, it's really more about at work or going to the theater. I don't have a good place to set it up at the moment. So I do not have an Atmos setup. Will I? Yes, one of these days. But I do not right now.
And to jump in real quick for like the viewers that think that's crazy, because I know from home theater people, they probably think that's nuts, right? But like, I've been mixing music for 20 years, right? I don't listen to like hi-fi music on like a super high-end like stereo setup in my free time, even though like that's what I do. I don't do that in my free, like home theater. Yes, that's one of my things I do in my free time. So for everybody like that, if their jaw is dropped that someone working in the industry doesn't have an Atmos system at home, that's normal. It's work, too. It's not, it doesn't have to be.
You don't want to take your work home.
Yeah, you don't always. Even if it's something you love, you don't always. You want to do other things. So.
Yeah, I spend all day, lots of days sitting on a dub stage. I don't generally come home and want to check out an Atmos mix or something. I do at times on the weekend to go see a film or something, but I'm still thinking about what my favorite Atmos mix is. So keep talking.
keep talking. Yeah. Keep stalling. Everybody forget about the question.
No, and I'll speak. To Tim, and before you ask the question, I actually literally have a stereo. I have a stereo system in my main living room, partially because space requirements and all that other stuff. But one of my biggest concerns is making sure we talked about dialogue intelligibility and all that stuff. And so a lot of times when we come off the mix stage, I will bring the mix home and I'll put it on my stereo speakers in a really crappy, like I said, my room. I don't even run room correction. It's stereo, and I'll turn it down to like -40. And that's how I'll listen to it, because it's how I know that the dialogue's sitting through. And it's something I'm very proud of in my mixes, is that I try not to have people being remote jockeys. And that's not lowest common denominator. That's, can you hear the dialogue and can you do that? I think, so yeah, there are a lot of people in the business that they have decent systems and stuff, but it really, I mean, we're on a mixing stage with some of the best sounding rooms all day, every day. And so it's not necessarily a priority for me to do that right now. And I think there's all these amazing headphone technologies coming down the pike, and Sony's got some new stuff, and there's all kinds of stuff, you know, that's happening that will bring it here without the need to, you know, have our room set up. But yeah, Tim and I aren't anomalies with our brethren, you know, in this business.
I mean, that begs the question now: do you guys even watch movies on your spare time?
Oh, I watch so much content.
Okay.
Watch a lot of shows.
I mean, we were talking about YouTube and bands and a lot of music stuff before the show, but so you guys do watch?
No, my girlfriend Rebecca and I watch a ton of stuff. And, yeah, I do what I love, right? I mean, I'm so lucky that I get to do this all day, but it's because I love the business. I mean, I love great storytelling. And so yes, we consume a lot of content, and there are times too where I have to go watch things with somebody I might be working with, or we inherit a project from somebody else, or they weren't happy with somebody, you know, a season of a show, and there's all that. So we have to be able to at least evaluate it. But I think you know, Tim and I have enough experience too that we don't need great rooms to be able to listen to somebody else's work and go like, oh yeah, this is or isn't what's working.
You listen to their stuff on your stereo to be like, can't hear the dialogue.
I'll listen to that.
They messed up.
But there's a lot of times where you go like, oh, the backgrounds are too loud, right? All the airs are like there's things that you don't need. You don't need a lot, you know, of it. In terms of good Atmos mixes, I mean, you guys can go out and listen to any of my work. I mean, I'm not saying they're all great at Atmos mixes. I think we've tried to just do some really cool stuff over the last couple of years and really embrace the format and do that stuff. And I'm very proud of, you know, Last of Us. And Last of Us is a show that's not a really loud show, but we used a ton of stuff for reverbs and ambiances and trying to kind of create and developing things.
The moods in those scenes.
Yeah. It's a much less obvious thing. I mean, there's some really obvious cool things in that, and the music's really cool. But in the best Atmos mixes, I mean, I think in the last 2 years, I'll have to give you some examples. The Creator, I think, is one of the best Atmos mixes, and you guys will see. I think I read today, July 7th, but I think Civil War is a really great, very dynamic mix. It's not always the most active overhead. There's plenty of stuff, but it's a really great job of using sound to tell stories and silences, and it's I think people are gonna I hope people are really blown away. I think it's a really, really cool mix, you know, enough so that I mean that's when I went and saw the theater twice within 2 weeks.
Wow,
really, really cool.
Yeah,
now Tim, it's on you.
So you're saying I shouldn't have bailed on going with you to go see Civil War then that night?
That's right.
Yeah, clearly. Yes, you could have fought. You could have been like, he could have just been like, yes, ditto.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't get out there as much as Mark has been. You know, though I love what I do and I do enjoy it. You know, I think for these last few years, which is a wonderful thing, I've been very busy, but I think it's also made it to where I've worked so much that I've not either had the time or, you know, made the effort to get out and see enough films out there lately, or watch enough TV and such. So coming up with a recent Atmos mix is a little bit trickier for me, unfortunately.
Just say Dune.
Yeah, I was saying, like,
Hey,
I mean,
Dune?
it's really hard to beat. It's
Well,
really hard to beat Dune or Dune 2. I mean, like,
well, I mean,
unreal. Those are unreal. Those
agreed, and I'm actually working on Dune Prophecy for HBO at the moment.
Oh,
so
nice.
look at that.
I'll be watching more Dune
I
coming
mean,
up.
I was going to watch that anyways, but now even more reason. So,
Yeah. So since you brought that up, you said dynamic
Yeah.
mix. So what is considered a dynamic Atmos mix?
it's so funny that you said that word dynamic, because I just did a post on a couple of those groups we're in about how I think YouTubers
saw
use
it, I
that
saw
word.
it,
Yeah,
I saw
YouTubers
it.
use that word dynamic in way
Well,
too
what is
many
that?
things.
Right.
you
So
know?
what does that mean to you guys, like having a dynamic Atmos mix?
I'll
As
let
the
you take
ones
that,
as the
Tim.
ones
I mean, I'll
creating it, yeah.
Yeah.
Either one. Either Tim, Mark, whomever.
Mark, you can take that one if you want.
well, I think one of the things.
Love it.
Thanks,
I
Tim.
love it.
This is the way on the things go on the mixing stage.
Yeah.
Hey Tim,
Mark, you
this
do
thing
it.
doesn't work. I think that's your problem.
Yeah, no problem, Mark. Fix it.
Oh man.
I think one of the things about Atmos that we learned, it took us a couple years to learn, is Atmos doesn't work when things are loud. And I mean, when there's a lot going on, as soon as there is sound coming out of the speakers, be it music or whatever, it's very hard for the human brain to perceive this stuff overhead. It's just the way that
Oh, yes.
had our ears evolve.
Mhm.
So when you ask about really good dynamic mixes, I think the gold standard for a long time has been Gravity, and Gravity is really interesting because it's a very dialogue-based
Heavy.
mix.
Mhm.
There's not a ton of sound effects because they stuck with there's no sound in space kind of thing, but a very dynamic score. I think when you ask me that question, I think it really has to do with the ambient type scenes and the things where it's quieter. And there's things that then kind of, just like dynamics in any type of music recording or that, where things might pop out. But again, I mean, if you listen to the Creator, I mean, the Creator is just awesome. Some of the best low end I've heard in years and all that other stuff. And it's got really quiet, soft moments and stuff too. So that's those are good examples. And again, I brought up Civil War. Civil War is one of the most dynamic mixes, just overall in terms of dynamic range. Of an entire mix.
Okay, so what I'm hearing from you is what the home theater people think is a dynamic Atmos mix, and what you say is a dynamic mix, Atmos mix, are two totally different things. Okay, so
that's my opinion,
talking.
Yes.
Well, no. This is great because you're thinking about it from dynamic range, right?
Yeah.
We got
Which is what it should be. The way Mark said it is right.
Mhm.
And like when I made that post, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Like dynamics really means one thing in audio. Really, it's the difference between loud and soft.
Right.
Dynamics in its purest form in music is like when you play something loud, that's forte. When you play something soft, that's piano.
Piano, yeah.
And dynamic range is the difference in volume between the loudest and softest. Like that's all that word should be used for.
Right.
I think it's got lumped in with. I
Mhm.
think people are using dynamic. Maybe this is where you were going with this, China, what you're about to say, but I think some people confuse dynamic with active when they think about like stuff moving around a lot versus that should be active versus static, like object versus bed layer stuff, in an Atmos mix. And that's in a way, like you could think it's dynamic just because things are moving around a lot, but I wouldn't describe it like that. Describe it as active, or just say things are moving around a lot. Dynamics really should just have to do with volume. When you're talking about audio, yes, you can deal with dynamics in video, but like we're just talking about audio here. So
they're the home theater, like in Facebook groups and on YouTube, they'll say when there's a lot of objects flying around, that's a dynamic Atmos mix. Whereas which it always seemed weird to me to say that, because for me it's like the difference between loud and quiet scenes. So active, we should okay, you hear that, everybody watching and everybody on the replay,
please,
we need to call it an active
just say there's lots of objects moving,
lots of shit flying around is also a good way to describe it.
Well, and I want to bring something up, because this is gonna over the next couple of years it's going to be less apparent to people, but there was a really big change in the last half of 2023 in Pro Tools. And Pro Tools gave us the ability to mix in 916 natively, meaning that normally when we mix the show, we would have these 9-channel beds. So we'd have the 7 channels and then 2 overhead channels. And then we'd have to make objects to hit the wides or to hit, the overhead speakers or do all that other stuff.
Right.
And there's things like the Trinov that has an object viewer and all this, so people can watch and see all this dynamic metadata stuff. There was a big change at the end of the year with Pro Tools, and Pro Tools now allows you to have a 916 bus, right?
Oh,
Wow.
The reason I'm bringing that up is when you set up a 916 bus, you have 2 objects that are static that go to the wides, and then you have 6 objects that are in the top, front, middle, and rears. People are going to start seeing a lot less moving objects, but audio is going to be panning through all those things. It's going to be a different way of doing it, not necessarily using dynamic objects. And people will be like, oh, this is BS or whatever. So they're going to see a little less of that, but it still has the same effect as me taking an object and panning through the overheads. But it's not going to be as obvious to people that are looking at those things and trying to do the minutia of it.
It's not going to show up as an object. It's going to be rendered into the bed.
Correct. They'll see the channel meters going. So I just warn people over the next couple of years, people will be like, oh my God, they did a printout. And it's like,
too bad.
Actually not what it is.
People have to actually use their ears rather than their eyes for once. I mean,
exactly. And I think we can, there's all kinds of myriad topics on printouts and all that other stuff, but that's something that's going to happen. And the reason Chen and I connected a couple of weeks ago is I wanted to talk about one of his videos about Dolby and the panning and all this other stuff. And, one of the things that people need to remember about home Atmos versus Cinema Atmos is that, in Cinema Atmos, you can have a speaker that's right above the screen and things can come off the screen and go up. And when Dolby designed home Atmos, they gave us 5 pairs of overhead speakers. And so everybody thinks, okay, we've got the top, fronts, middles, and rears. But one of the other speakers you can have are height fronts and backs. Mm-hmm. And so Chen and I are talking about this, like, if you want something to come off the screen and go up over the thing instead of coming out into the room, it would behoove you to have, the
something
dot 10 overhead, right? The heights, you wouldn't have that gap, but it is one of the ways that the channel was absolutely right about that thing of if you're looking at the Dolby renderer and you pull something off the screen, if you actually listen to the sound, it kind of jumps off into the room. And that's just the design of some of the limitations of being able to only have 5 pairs of overheads instead of, the not infinite, but myriad that we can have in the theater.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, you've got so many in a commercial theater,
What's funny is I saw, somebody was trying to like school me on the whole situation like over a year ago. On Twitter, he sent me the picture of all the speakers in an array in the theater, like a side profile shot. And if you, I really need to find this. If you look at it, it's like a whole bunch of speakers up top. The very front and the very rear are angled. And then the one right above the person is right above them, like 90 degrees, right? So if you were just to shrink that down, that's exactly what I was saying. It was like something at the front of the room, something at the rear of the room, and one in the middle to cover. I say, if you have, I do a lot of live sound, a lot of DJ gigs, and if I want sound over on that side of the room, I put a speaker over there. So if you have proper coverage, you got all the angles covered. That's what I like to say.
Well, and I think we talked about this too. That I think Dolby made, and I'd say this, Dolby made a little bit of a mistake in making their visual representation a square, or a rectangle, because that wasn't ever the idea. I mean, Atmos was also partially about atmosphere, and that's what they really did think about it as a dome over people, and the visualization shows it as a thing where it should be there. And so that's just something we talked about that I think Dolby, as this has evolved over the years, it's something they haven't decided to fix. If you look at something like Logic and their Atmos renderer, they do it as a dome. I mean, they
no. It's a cube. It's a cube.
Oh, is it?
Yeah. The only thing that they do is kind of a dome is the bed panel. Like if you go up, it'll bring, it's like a dome, so it'll bring the
pulls out
into the room. Yeah.
The thing that I use, the Fiedler audio plugin, which is it's kind of this plugin that lets you mix in Atmos and other DAWs and not have to use their native thing, and it is exactly a dome. Like it's literally like the renderer looks, or his renderer, whatever, is literally like speakers, how it is set up in a room, and it's like, I feel like that's, if Dolby could have had their way, they would have done it like that, had they not, tried to, because this is a format that's coming from theatrical for a while before it's coming down to the home and getting to where people are going to be working on this on not the level that you guys are at. So it's like I feel like I don't know, whatever it is, they just kind of try to take the same thing and just keep scaling it down when it's like they probably should have made some changes along the way to get it down to a format or get it down to a look that's closer to what everyone's using at home and in studios and stuff.
Yes, I agree with Reverend Slim that they do. Dolby should spend a little. I mean, I know the guy who's responsible for that, so I will. For Reverend Slim, I'm going to call and yell at Tom tomorrow. So I'm going to ask a follow-up.
Jeremy
question
said
about
it's too confusing, Tom. Come on.
Exactly. But Tim, how did you guys change your approach to sound design and stuff when we went to Atmos? Because we've never really had that conversation.
Yeah, I mean, we don't generally do any Atmos painting at all, but we do keep in mind of keeping elements a little bit more split, so you have more freedom to move things as you need to. Tie your hands a little bit less. Not that we'd want to tie your hands, but instead of, I'll take a simple scene where we're outside, instead of having just one, bed of wind or air, give you 2, 3, 4 beds of it. So some can be up front, some can be on the sides, and put over, so you've got room to move things. The same goes for, the bigger things, bigger design things.
What about, can you talk a little bit about like what you did for a Hardhome, where you guys won an Emmy for that one, right?
We did, though. Funny enough, that was what was delivered to HBO was 5.1.
Oh, really?
We did not do Atmos on Thrones. We never delivered Atmos. They pushed for us to. Dolby did at one point, but showrunners and producers were not jumping on the Atmos bandwagon at first.
Really?
So
odd.
No, Hardhome was 5.1. We mixed the last 2 or 3 seasons in 7.1.
7.1.
And then it was delivered in 5.1 because that's what HBO was airing it as. Sure. But then they did Atmos up mixes after the fact.
Oh, so they unmixed it for the disc, because I know for a fact that like the discs say Atmos. Oddly enough,
they're not drastically different.
Okay.
I'm not sure how much I should say about it, but they weren't big on don't distract, don't put the dragons left and right and back, and they wanted your attention on the screen, so they weren't big on doing too much with panning on in that sense. Okay. So when it went to Atmos, when they first started doing it, they started messing with a little bit more panning, and the producers went in and said, no, we want it to feel like the same mix. Do a little bit, you can use it, but don't abuse it, basically. As far as our prep hasn't changed a ton. We just, we're just making sure that things are split out in a way so it's easy for mixers to say, oh, I want to make this an object. Let me take this one element and do this with it. So it's.
I could only imagine. I'm trying to I don't. I'm still just doing all of this Atmos mixing for fun. Mm-hmm. So sometimes I'll get. I got some stems the other day from my stem dealer. I had to it was one of those shady deals. Like I was trying to buy weed 20 years ago. And I had to use a AI to take, they had lumped in like a vocal with like the chords of the synth. And I'm like, why did they do this? So I used the AI thing to get the vocal. It was just like a
separate it out.
Yeah, to separate it out. And that, just that in itself makes it a lot easier to mix and do all that kind of stuff. So these guys. Well, hey, this is Techno Dad Unfiltered. I know, sometimes I get a little unhinged. I've only had one Truly, so it's not. We're not getting crazy here. I know I found this happy hour spot like right around the corner here. It's like buy one get one free. From 5 to 8 every day. How awesome is that? Just hang out in the office a little bit longer than I need to, and boom, it's beer o'clock. Yeah. Let's see.
Somebody asked in the chat I saw earlier just about the recommendations for Dolby speaker placement and stuff, and I think I think one of the things that's important to remember is, if you're going to designate your things as tops or as heights, the renderer will change a little bit, but
Yep.
the home Atmos renderer is not, it's not self-aware of where anything is in the room, right? It's got these lookup tables. So when you say, okay, this needs to render there, it doesn't necessarily make the same types of changes that it would in a cinema system. But for anybody that's got, anything that's a .6 system, and you can even try with a .4, you can try changing those designations between tops and to heights and see if you feel that there's a little smoother transition. It should be a little bit, but I don't think you'll see anything drastic. But it's not as much as people wanted to talk about things being layout agnostic, or you can put your speakers wherever and the Atmos will figure and know all that stuff. I mean, that never happened, and I don't think it ever really will happen, especially with anything that's less than an 11 channel or lower system. So just to keep that in mind. But that is something you can try, is designating the tops as heights and see if you feel there's a smoother transition off the screen.
One of our guys actually did that in the. Let's see if I can get here. If I'm not logged. Oh no, stupid PC. So one of our guys in our I'll do a shameless plug right now. Spatial Audio Calibration Toolkit. Go ahead, buy it. Spatialcd.com. Get the most out of your Dolby Atmos home theater. Tim, if you didn't know, myself and my buddy created this. This is the world's first Dolby Atmos calibration disc for home theater enthusiasts. Yeah, can you believe it? Yeah, Dolby didn't make it. My buddy and I made it.
Yes. I think you thought it up at that happy hour next door.
You know what we can do, man? Can we put some pink noise through the height channels? Yeah, man, I can do that in my sleep. So yeah.
The disc is awesome though. I can attest to that.
Yes. Thank you,
user
Nick.
of it. It's great. Yep.
Thank you, Nick, for
anybody
promoting
who who is thinking about get it. It's worth it. There's lots of great stuff in there. So
yeah. What was I going to say now? I totally forgot.
Well, we were talking about the
heights versus
with the heights versus the tops. And
right. So someone in the owners group in the owners Discord of the Spatial Toolkit is he actually went ahead and did a whole bunch of experiments, and with the Denon, there is a difference. From front height, if you set up as front height, top, middle, and rear height, you will get the sounds at the corners of like where you would in the renderer. But if you set it up for the in-ceiling speakers, you get it in like 25% into the room. Like nothing will actually move to that location. He's using our, the sounds in our toolkit. And he's got this, he tried every different configuration, and even the ones where it's like a front height with top rear, there's like a dead space essentially in the way the objects will wait a little bit until it gets to a certain point, and then it'll start moving into the high channel. So a lot of interesting stuff we're learning because of now that everything's a little bit more, I guess, readily available to consumers to to try out and stuff. So
I feel like I don't know if I can just chime on this quick. And Johnny, you and I have talked about this. I mean, we agree on a lot of stuff. One thing we kind of disagree on about is that the height placement, or just more like what we like. And but what we always say when we talk about it is like, with the height stuff specifically, there's a couple different ways you can do it, and they're both right and both accepted, as far as like practice in home theater and what the processors will do. Because like you said, you can tell it's a height or it's a top, and it's more like what kind of experience are you looking for? Because Chana, you always say you like the sound of when something like the front and the back height speakers. You always say that you like it to have cohesion with the
the
front,
vertical,
left, and right, and the rear surrounds. And whereas me, I like to have like the separation. I like the height layer, separated. So I've got, 4 heights in my setup, and I've got them in, pretty close at like, 55 degrees. So yes, I will get that. Like if, that sound or that test that you had made, where you have a sound that goes from the front right to the, front top right, it does kind of go like this. But what I feel like is, when they're that close to you like that, you really get that sense of stuff being on top of you. And in most of our spaces in these home theaters, we're dealing with 8 foot, 9 foot, maybe 10 foot ceilings if you're lucky. I feel like putting it closer kind of helps give that separation from the bed layer and actually feel like something is on top of you. Now, you just may not like the sound of that. You may like it more like Chana likes it, where you like it to just kind of lift off of the bed layer. And I do feel like, if you have really tall ceilings, that would be a great use of like what Chana likes to do with, like I said, have the 6 height configuration where you have the fronts and the backs on the wall, because then if it's high enough, like if you got a 15-foot ceiling or something, then you do have quite a bit of separation from the bed layer. Yeah, and you're going to get that straight up. So you can kind of get the best of both worlds, but I think in the, as we always say in home theater, there's always compromises in every situation. So that's why I feel like, especially if you're running 4 height speakers, which a lot of us are, I like the, the in closer, the kind of the 55 degrees all around, because that just gives you that sound of it being above you and more of that dome of sound thing. But there's really, there, like we said, there's more than one way to do this. So whichever you like best is kind of like, you just need to try and experiment and see what you like best. You might have a couple holes in your wall from where you moved your height speakers around, but people just got to try this stuff and see what kind of sound they like best, and if your receiver can differentiate between heights and tops, do that and try it and just see what you like best. As long as it sounds good to you, that's really kind of the most important thing.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, what are we really like talking about? Where to put your speakers? Like, I mean, let's not like get all like up in arms about it. After that video, I know you were talking about Mark. One commented, "Now I've got 6 holes in my ceiling." No, sorry, 12. He's at 12 holes in his ceiling, and he finally like figured out. He's like, "Okay, Chana, I'm gonna go with your way, and then fill up these other 6 holes." I was like, "Oh damn!" I mean, my viewers are crazy. My viewers are crazy.
It's why Tim and I have jobs, because people love this stuff.
Yes,
exactly.
And we're very thankful. We're very thankful for your guys' work.
Yeah.
Like I said, I said it before, Mark. Some of your stuff is is reference stuff as far as me. So just can't thank you guys enough for the good work that you guys are doing.
Oh my gosh. So. And I mean, Tim and I have. What is this, Tim? Was this the 4th or 5th show we got to work on?
In recent years, yeah.
Yeah, and it's just it's so. I mean, we as mixers, we just are always so thrilled to have somebody like Tim. And again, if you look at Tim's body of work, it makes our life so much easier, and we get to be so much more creative. And I'll embarrass him a little bit. I'm just so thankful, and he's the best supervisor I've worked with. And
you're gonna make me blush here.
Tim and I have done some cool stuff together, so it's really a team effort.
Yeah, I mean, I love working with Mark. I think we both have similar tastes on everything, and it's easy to know what if Mark's looking for something, he doesn't usually have to say much. I think I know what he's looking for. I know his taste on what he wants to hear, but also, a big part of my job on getting the sounds to them, it's not just a matter of what the sounds are, but that they're easy to figure out, when he's looking at a bunch of tracks in front of him, that they make sense. So he knows what he's trying to find, what's making what noise, getting that to him.
And I always, I mean, again, I'm sorry, Ken.
No, go ahead.
I think it's one of the things I say, and it's not about me trying to pick a rock up and look under the rock at other people's work and stuff. But, if you look at, I think it's really important for people get really hung up on studios, and we can talk about some of the studios we know that people feel are quote unquote offenders of good taste and all that stuff with Atmos mixes and their home theater mixes and stuff. And there are certain things to be said about that. And that could be a whole other 5 podcasts, but I really encourage people, when they hear something that they like, to go out and listen to go look at the credits on IMDb and see who the re-recording mixers and the sound designers were. I ran into a sound designer yesterday, and it's the team that does, Stranger Things. Will and his team, and they were just finishing the new
very
Alien
good
movie
Atmos mix.
Yeah, and they were just finishing the new Alien mix yesterday. And I'm just like, I cannot wait to hear this. And it's the thing about not necessarily thinking, okay, I got to go get this new Sony release, or I got to get this new, thing, or watch this thing on HBO. But I think it is really, if I have to say a shout out to our community, I've been doing this for 34 years. I think it is really important if you like something. Again, you can go look at all Gary Reistrom's work, and it's pretty spectacular, and it's really good. You go look at Randy Tom's work. You go look at that, and so I just encourage people not to always get so hung up on it's an HBO show or it's a Netflix show or it's
on Disney.
Exactly,
yeah, well, and you know, Mark, you mentioned the creator. That's a Disney mix, you know, and that's a very that's a really great Atmos mix, and that's technically Disney. So
yeah, so amazing. And so, you know, when you go look at Tim's amazing body of work, I mean, the stuff that we did on Lovecraft, but that he did on Battle the Bastards, on Thrones, or the cool shit he did, I mean, on Avatar just recently. And we've been talking to him a lot about what he's going to do on Dune. I mean, that's, you know, I think it's really important for people to make that effort instead of, and obviously these are all home and theater enthusiasts, but I just have to push because I love this community and I love what our industry is capable of. I think that's really important, is to kind of seek out some things that you like, and I think you can find it that way rather than like, this Disney mix sucks, or this, you know, Warner Brothers thing is this, that, or the other. And I think you'll start finding the people that you really like, and you go, yeah, if I want to hear a cool Atmos mix, I can go look at the Skip Leavesay stuff, right? Mm-hmm. And Skip did Gravity, and he did Roma, and he did, you know, Skip's an amazing mixer and really knows how to use the format, right? Or you can look at you know, Tom and Dean, who did The Creator and who also did you know, Star Is Born, and who just did Maestro. Again, Maestro, you wouldn't think it's a really amazing Atmos mix, right? So there's these things you can start looking at these people and kind of figuring things out that way too. I just encourage people to do that if they're looking for things, to start looking that way. The people who did it, not necessarily the studios. Yeah.
Mark, do you know Jeremy B. Davis, I think is his name? I think you've worked with him on a couple of things.
Jeremy was our assistant on Power Rangers. I know Jeremy very well.
Because he, so like another, I just found this show. It's not the greatest show, but it's like right up there with your stuff as far as like a streaming show, Atmos mix. With this show,
Resident Evil.
No, it's called Another Life on Netflix. Again, it's not the greatest show, but it is insanely good Atmos. Like it's, again, everything a home theater fan would want. Anybody here who's watching, you know, Chana's audience, go check it out, because I mean, just put on the first 5 minutes, the first episode, and you'll see it's like I said before, you know, it's everything is everywhere you'd expect it to be. You know, anytime anything is remotely above you, they put it in the height speakers, you know, and just stuff all around and insane bass. But I you know, I wanted to look up who was on it. He was one of the guys on there, and then I saw he had worked with you on some other things, and I was like, that makes sense.
We did Power Rangers, and we did a lot of shows together. And he also used to be the assistant to kind of one of the most legendary re-recording mixers in the business, and so he's learned well. I mean, not because of me. I'm just saying that wasn't meant to, that I taught him well. I'm saying he's been around some really amazing people, and it's probably one of the sharpest Pro Tools people you'll ever meet in the business.
Nice.
So Jeremy's great.
Very good. Very good. Let me get these out of the way. Hey, thank you so much for the super chats, C-Big and Tim Perry. Appreciate you guys for doing that. And I got a question for you guys. Where can I find me some stems so I can get some practice on a TV show or something?
I can maybe get you some stems.
I know guys got stems.
You got stems? You got stems? Right, see, that's what I'm talking about, man. Like I need a stems dealer. I got let me see what I got here.
I got stems.
All right. Yeah. I mean, I know there
hasn't been like anything like that that's popped up, like courses online. Because I know as far as the music side of things, in the past, like, I don't know, 5 to 7 years, and I've got a good buddy who started a really great whole, you know, learning program for people. But there's quite a few music things like that where you can get stems from, you know, either it's a lot of them are from, you know, bands that are just, you know, it's like stuff you've heard, and they get the guy who mixed the song to come in, and they'll get the stems out, and you get, as long as you're signed up for the course, you can get the stems and mix it. Now you can't put it in your portfolio or anything, obviously, like that. But is there anything like that for music or TV? There's got to be some courses out there like that where you can get access to some stems.
I don't know, but one of the problems with television and film is that, well, there's two problems. One, the music, licensing for the music, and they own that. But even on something, Tim can explain this a little more in detail, but the studios own the sound effects at this point. They have licensed them for it becomes like music, right? They become licensed for use. And so for Tim to give stems out with his sound effects, again, once, because it's separated too, stuff can start getting picked off. It becomes a deal. That doesn't mean that Tim or I would or would never try and help you guys out, but that is actually one of the reasons it's not so easy to do that. It's because it's not about us. It's because the studios that pay us to do these shows, they do end up in the end. It is their property.
Their property, right?
Yeah,
and they have the license on them. Most of the ones I get from music is I'm on the remix websites all the time.
Yeah,
all the time for music, and that's where I get some good stems. So since we're talking about stems, Tim, what is stems? What are stems?
I was going to ask if we need to explain that.
Yeah, why not? Yeah, go ahead. Take it. Take it over,
So I think we've been talking about the different categories of what goes in the soundtrack: dialogue, ADR, loop group, sound effects, backgrounds, Foley, music. Mark, help me if I'm mixing it. And sometimes you go a little wider. Sometimes sound design can be split out from sound effects. But basically, what happens is, the mixers are mixing everything together. So what everybody hears is all those things, all those elements put together. But in that process, it gets mixed down to all the dialogue gets mixed to a stem. So it'd be a 5/1 stem, a 7/1 stem, a 9/1 2. Depends on what format we're mixing to. So you get dialogue stems are on their own. So everything's mixed. The dialogue for one stem, then the loop group for one stem, then the sound effects for a stem, then the Foley is a stem. So the stems are the individual elements, basically, but not the individual sounds, like not each line of dialogue, but all the dialogue gets printed to a dialogue stem, as it's called. So dialogue track, and then so on and so forth. So those are the stems.
And if that still was too much for some people, to make it simple, and in music there is stems, but the simplest way you could explain it is if you took AC/DC and you wanted to they made stems for that, there would be one track that is just the vocals by itself, then another track that is all of the guitars by themselves, then there's another track that's the bass by itself, and then there's another stereo track that's all the drums. Now the drums is comprised of whatever, might be 11 different tracks. You have individual mics on the drums plus the room mics, whatever.
Overheads,
so yeah, but a stem is multiple mono things or stereo things dumped down to one stereo file, basically. So that's the easiest way to understand it. Now, obviously,
one of the
movies,
reasons
we've got a lot more stuff going on.
So Beefy,
one of the reasons one of the reasons we have to do it is because, again, the foreign delivery is very important on these shows, and we have to take out. We do what's called an
foreign
M&E,
delivery.
Foreign.
Okay.
So when we have to do it for various different languages, we have to take all the dialogue out, and then we have to remix it. And what happens a lot of times is, again, we might not have all the Foley put in because there were feet in the dialogue. So we need to be able to add those back in, or the backgrounds might have been played lower because we had noisy dialogue that I couldn't clean up well. So anyways, there's a lot of prepping for what's coming down the line. And again, we still have to do, and an Atmos mix, we still have to do a 5/1 down mix. We still have to do a stereo down mix. We have to create what are called DM&Es, dialogue music effects, so that they can make trailers right next week on the Sympathizer. And so they take my dialogue mix, but they just need it only the dialogue, so they can put it in with whatever music and sound effects they might put in for the
trailer
advertising thing. Exactly. So anyways, there's a reason that we do that still, because it gives them flexibility down the road, and they might come back in 20 years and do Oro Atmos, Oro Atmos DTS 25, and have some other thing, and they want to do the holographic. So there's all that archiving and all that stuff for down the road. It's still a very important part of the process.
Okay. All right.
And it's coming.
It's coming. Atmos 25.
Oro with five layers below your feet, and
Well, I mean,
I really am wondering about the ground layer someday. I think that would be cool to hear something
Sony's got
underneath you.
Sony's got it in the 360. I got a demo at NAMM. Right, there's 9 speakers in front of you. There's the left, center, right. Then they have the left, center, right above, and then left, center, right on the floor. and then 4 speakers behind, like surround left, surround right, and then a height for each of those. And you know, some of the stuff they played, I was just like, what is happening? Like the main vocals behind me, I'm like, okay, this is just okay. Let's stop. This is too much. I like cool like, you know, stuff all over the place, but that was too much. There was one track though that was pretty on point. Something Himalayas or something like that. It's on like they only have that Sony 360 on Amazon. Amazon Play has that kind of stuff. So they have it, but I mean, I don't know, man. What would you put there? Little cat, little dog.
Yeah,
like,
I don't know, just like stuff crawling under your feet.
I don't understand.
Okay, I want to ask one more nerdy
Go ahead.
Atmos question to Mark, if I can. So, and again, this definitely relates to home theater. So, like I guess years ago, you know, whenever you first find out about Atmos, or we as consumers, we're told this thing of, okay, it's 360, well, not 360, whatever, but it's you can put the sound anywhere in the room, like, you know, as if like a foot to the right of my ear and a foot above me, not just like in a speaker, right? And I think that's like obviously not really the case, you know. I kind of like want to get your thoughts on that, number one, as far as like how well do you think Atmos actually does, you know, put something like in a specific spot in the room, and then like as far as mixing, you know, one of the things like some of the music mixers say is like when you're moving objects or just panning stuff, like keep everything on the wall, as they say, you know, don't bring stuff out don't bring an object out into the middle of the room. You know, and they cite reasons like, you know, if you have too many like phase issues, if you have too many speakers trying to play one sound. But I guess what's your thoughts on that, as far as just like I said, the general, has Atmos delivered on that, you know, promise of being able to play something super precisely? And when you're mixing, do you mostly, even though stuff is like moving around, do you mostly keep stuff like on the wall, as they say, or do you ever try to make stuff kind of you know, pass through the middle of the room, or even just like stay in the middle of the room? Do you ever try stuff like that? And what's your general thoughts on whether to do that or whether not to do that?
It's I think you can. I think one of the problems, it really is the problem of once you take that energy and you take it off of a side, right, and you try and put it in the middle of the room, the sweet spot becomes so small. So it becomes a little bit more about what's going to work most of the time. I actually, I made a really big mistake in Power Rangers. You know, I did something and I put a voice in a speaker. The mom is yelling for him downstairs and she's off camera, and I like put it in this one speaker on the thing. And then I went and watched it in the Village Theater, which is 1,400 seats, and you could barely hear it from the other side because I was like, oh, you know, I should have made it bigger and all that other stuff. My point being is that you definitely have to be careful. It's not that you can't. I mean, if you watch that show, The Sympathizer, we did, one of the very first things you hear is Robert Downey Jr.'s voice comes from behind you, and then it sweeps through the room over your head into the front, like he walks, and his feet and his voice does that. So it just all depends, Nick, what works and what's going to work for, you know, people there. And it can become really difficult because we still don't have a speaker really overhead, necessarily a mono speaker. So you're trying to do something using different things, and especially not having arrayed speakers at home. I mean, you can do it, and I don't believe in not doing it. You just listen to it, and if it works, it works, and then you might want to check it on the 5.1. It never stops me from doing it, thinking I shouldn't do this. It's just, what does it sound like, and is it going to work for people? The second part of that problem is, though, you know, Atmos and DTS, I gave them a lot of grief when DTS-X came out, because everybody said, oh, you can put your speakers and everything. It's like, well, DTS-X isn't a speaker remapping thing, right? You can't put your speakers anywhere. It's not, I mean, you can, and it'll say that the speaker is here. But the problem is there's no remapping technology, right? Trinov did it years ago, you know, and all this other stuff.
But it still is not perfect. I mean, the best thing is to put the speaker where it's close to where it's supposed to go, you know.
Correct. And so it's harder when you're talking about 2 or 3 speakers that there are other things that you have to start doing. Isono did it years ago, where they had, you know, all this phase technology that was playing through the speakers, and you could have sounds that were planar, and they'd follow you up the wall as you walked up the wall, or they would be like, literally, you could put that thing where a sound would be, you know, right by your ear.
Yeah.
But they had, you know, they had 380 speakers around the room. So,
Yep.
sorry, that's a long-winded way to say,
No, that's
you
sums it
do
up
what
great.
sounds good, but Atmos is not necessarily that.
Yeah.
Atmos gave us full range surrounds, bass managed surrounds finally in the theater, and it gave us an overhead layer.
Yeah.
And it didn't give us necessarily that really precise, I want to pull something down into the room this way, that was any more magical than what you could do in a 7.1, where you try to pull sound out,
Exactly.
kind of
Yeah.
put it out
Yeah.
there. So
Because just in my short time mixing Atmos, I've kind of, just from my experimenting, pulling stuff kind of in the middle doesn't seem to work as well as just keeping everything, you know, like I said, on the wall or moving around you. You know, and it's like listening to some stuff, or you look at some stuff where you can see the turnout viewer, you've seen a lot of mixes that they don't actually do stuff like through the middle of the room. A lot of it just kind of stays, you know, swirling around above you or moving around you. So it's but like you said, I definitely want to go check out that part you were talking about where you tried that. And I know Chana's definitely done some of that stuff like that in his mixes where you try to go through the room.
Yeah.
But it does seem
and
like
it works better on home. It works better on the home where
I
you
would
only
imagine.
have 2 speakers.
Yeah.
Than when we had like 40 literally, or
40,
but
exactly,
20 going up the wall, and it was coming out of one JBL speaker, you know, 30 feet up in the air.
Yeah.
But the home, and we accommodated for that on the home theater mix. I mean, we made sure it was louder.
So is
And
there
I'm-
any way, like some people have been asking, is there a technical reason, or is there any way that a home AVR can actually take a theatrical Atmos mix and like matrix it properly? Or I think it was,
No.
let me see. No.
It's so
Here's
it's
one.
always the home Atmos is limited by bandwidth, right? And
Okay.
so and that bandwidth was also limited by kind of the DVD spec, right? So True HD can only, you know, True HD, the thing with True HD, which works wholly differently than Dolby Digital Plus Atmos, but with True HD, you have to, the space, because it's lossless and it's a variable bitrate codec, it has to be able to go up to whatever the max of that is. And I've it's been years since I've looked at it, but I think with True HD, it's like 48 megabits a second. It's a really large thing, and you have to be able to do that. But even with that, theatrical Atmos is 118 mono PCM 24-bit channels. So you can, if you have a mix, it's got all 128 channels going. Obviously, the bandwidth is substantial. So there really isn't. It wasn't designed that way. It wasn't designed from the go. It was designed to be backwards compatible with both True HD and with Dolby Digital Plus. So no, I don't think it'll get there. Again, I think the real trick and what they're working on is more virtualization techniques on the AVR side to give a little bit more precision and do that. And you know, people, like I said, I've been involved with Dolby with Home Atmos. I mean, I saw it about a year before it was released, and we've been talking about it, and I continue to talk to them. They're working on doing some other things. I think the reality is there's a much bigger emphasis right now on having a better immersive experience. I hate to say it, on TVs, on sound bars, and then headphones for people.
Yeah.
And they are doing some of the headphone stuff they're doing is really amazingly cool. I don't think we'll see any expansion in the optical front or anything different. I mean, I can't see it. And then all that being said is, I think we are in a pretty good place. I mean, I think there's some pretty spectacular mixes, 5171 Atmos and stuff at home. So everybody, there's some people I saw in the chat talk about me being on AVS. I've been kind of argumentative for a long time and taking a bit of flack, but you do have to be a realist too. It's part of there is a very big business part about this, about, idealism doesn't always fit into everybody's plan.
The bean counters don't care about that. The shareholders want to make their money. That's, at the end of the day, that's kind of,
and it's not me being accepting of like, okay, it's okay if it sucks. It's like, well, again, if I can make the best use of what we have rather than this is what I want it to be, then that's that's a reality. And again, I think we've done some really, really cool stuff. And I do think what we have now with the Trinovs and the Storm Audios and the Den, all this stuff is really amazing. And it's really cool to see what people have been doing.
Yeah, I know Alan Meyerson, who did the Dune, the soundtrack to Dune, immersive mix. He's like, we try to do the best we can with what the time that we had, and next time we'll just try to do better and make it even better. And JR has a question here. Which is the biggest constraint to produce a good Atmos mix, time or budget? Or does that not even play do those not even play a factor?
I personally don't think it. I mean, I think Tim and I's entire job is how much time you got, this how much money you have, but it really isn't hard as a mixer. And as Kim said, he's going to produce those extra wins for somebody, and if the mixer decides he's going to play him, it really doesn't take much more time for us to do that. I have a music setup that is my starting music setup, and it's got a dome actually, Nick, and that's what I do is I dome the orchestra over the thing and all that. It takes me no more time or money. Sometimes you don't have enough time to go and do the cool overhead swirly shit and all that, but you just got to find the people that are making mixes you like, and then you got to hire them. I mean, it sounds like a tried answer, but we can do some really cool. I did a show called Zoe's Extraordinary Playlist that we mixed in Atmos for NBC, and we, those shows we had, 3 days to mix, and there were 10 musical numbers and all that, and we did it in Atmos, but like they were, we did as best as we could, and all the voices are moving around with the actors and stuff, and so you try and prioritize. And but money equals time, and that is always the constraint on this. Kim and I could spend another week on every episode of the Sympathizer and make it different. Would it make it better?
Yep.
That's maybe
one of the oldest sayings about a mix is you never finish it, you just stop. You just pick when to be done.
Escapes.
Yeah. That's why deadlines are actually a good thing, I think, because it's like you could spend too much time. I work better when I have a constrained amount of time. Like, got to get this done in, because it's like infinite amount of time. You just do too much.
They say that about art too. In every form of art. Yep. Yeah. You just stop working on it.
Good.
Beefy, still unclear what stems offer over multi-track here. Okay, so real quick, Beefy. Let's say if it's in any kind of like house or techno, I've seen it all the time. There's hi-hats. Every piece of the drum kit is boom, 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 boom. That's the multi-track. Okay. The drum stem is all those squashed together into a stereo print for the stem. That's it.
I think of it like if on the recording there's 5 different guitar tracks that I recorded, or even let's say there's 10 different background vocals, like I have 4-part harmonies, whatever. That's all going to come down to one stereo track. So that's just easy. Just think of it as grouping, like it's like the whole group of instruments in one stereo track.
Right. Yeah. Like a lot of EDM, there's like 4 different basses, but that's just going to be one stereo track. It's just
if you want to fool, like they have all these AI stem splitters now, like Moises or that.
That's the one I use.
Yeah. Like, so if you want to see what stems are, though, like just do the free version, it does it with AI. So there's going to be artifacts, but it literally breaks it down that way. It'll break it down into vocals, drums, bass, and other stuff, so depending on what the style is. So if you want to hear what like stems would sound like in their simplest form, just go start messing with that, and you can plug any song in there and it'll do it for you.
Perfect segue. James Sparkman asked, do they think AI will be mixing Atmos in the near future? What's going on, Mark? Are you all
Oh,
right?
nothing.
You
I
all
was
right?
gonna- I was gonna
You
let,
right?
No. Tim and I have been having, I mean, obviously our entire business is having, this is a very existential crisis for everybody in our business. And it is, you can't go a day without us all talking about it. I think the way we'll see, with what Tim does, we're already starting to see some AI things that can identify what's on a screen. So it can say, this is an airplane, and it can put an airplane sound effect with it, and it can pan it, and it can figure those things out. It doesn't mean it's a good airplane sound, right? It doesn't necessarily mean it's a nuanced airplane sound. It doesn't mean that it's the right airplane sound. My job is really being told what I'm doing wrong all day, right? I mean, when something's not, if I was doing everything right, the mix would take 2 hours and we'd be done. And we make all these creative decisions. I think we might see some pre-mixing happening with AI in the next 5 or 10 years. But I think it's a whole different conversation when a showrunner says, you know, Mark, this just doesn't feel purple enough. I've had people say that to me. This doesn't, it's not hitting me here. And I think that interaction, and I think we're talking about that in all of our businesses, right? You can do generative AI and make a painting, but if you say, well, that makes me feel sad, what about that makes me feel sad? How does AI interact with the input? And when I say that about mixing, how does a director interface with me? And I don't think a director's going to want to sit there and have to be able to run the computer to tell the AI mixer what is going to be there. And I think that's to me, that's the whole crux of what AI is still not ready to do. And I think we've seen time and time again that's what they're working on. Maybe one day that'll be there. And honestly, maybe one day the companies won't care and they'll do, there's programs right now that you can say, make this song sound like this song.
Spit out a country song about, you know,
Make
whatever,
my
about
mix
pajamas or
sound
something,
like
and it'll
Marc
do it.
Fishman's mix.
Yeah,
Or
exactly.
you can play a Taylor Swift song and literally say to Isotope, okay, I want you to make my track sound like this, and it'll analyze it and it'll do things. Again, that's a linear. A song is a linear
thing. Yeah.
A song is a finite 2-minute thing that is not interacting and trying to tell a story in a dynamic way. So anyways, my long-winded point is that I don't think we're going to be there in the next 5 or 10 years.
Oh yeah.
I don't think Tim's going to be replaced in 5 or 10 years. Will we?
Hope not.
Will you know? There's programs now that, and they just released a film where it can dub a foreign language and also make the lips match.
Really?
There's just
that's cool.
I'll send you a link to this thing.
Yeah.
It's cool, but
a little scary too.
What does that do to the actors, right? And what does that do? And when it can do that, and that's what these strikes were about. As hard as the strikes have been on us, the actors said, well, we need to be in control of our voice and our likeness in this. So I think those are all the existential things we're dealing with. And again, that could be months and months and months. That's going to be the next bunch of years of our lives. I think
every creative industry is struggling with how to tackle AI right now. We'll pick a creative industry and they're all like scared of it, you know. But
I'm totally not.
I'm
totally not.
I'm not really right now either.
Walking around and using guns. I'm okay, right? Until we get have to worry about a bomb dropping. I'm okay.
Yeah,
I'm okay with using AI to write copy or whatever. A whole novel. I don't know.
Yeah.
You know,
the thing that people have to remember is that all it can do right now, all the AI can do right now is just spit out some amalgamation of something we've already done. You know, it can't create something that hasn't been done before. It has to have some frame of reference. Now, I know what's the guy, Ray Kurzweil, you know, that there's whatever he thinks that there's going to be that singularity. That's wherever the AI reaches its point where it knows what it is, and then it'll, you know,
then
be able to create on its own. Yeah, exactly. Then we're in Terminator 2 or whatever. But we're definitely not there yet, and it feels like it's a ways away from that, because it's like everything AI does now is just some copy or rip off of something we've already produced. So there still has to be creative people to put out new things, you know, that haven't been done yet.
Well, Jeff Bezos had a quote a couple of years ago that was about, somebody said, well, what do you say about the people that complain that you're putting the mom and pops out of business because you're doing things faster and cheaper and all this? And Jeff Bezos said, well, in 50 years, somebody else is going to put us out of business because they're going to find out how to do it better, faster, cheaper. And he said, complaining is not a business strategy, right? And so for Tim and I want to be involved with this technology. I mean, I can't, if I put my head in the sand and just say, it's not going to, we fight it, I think we have a responsibility to be vocal about it, but I also think we're going to have to be the ones that help these people to move forward and to identify what works and what doesn't work. And, and in 5 years that they want to mix all their movies and not have a sound editor or not have me around, then all the movies are going to look like, a YouTube video on repeat, and consumers aren't going to pay for it. And
YouTube videos, those things suck, man. Get those out of here.
and you all know what is eventually going to happen too, is if we have this AI takeover, it's going to be like every, sci-fi movie, or like The Creator, where you have like, there's going to be a large faction of people who are like anti-AI, who want to like, just only like, I only want to listen to music that was never touched by humans.
It's all like, natural.
It's like people made by humans. I don't want to listen to any music that was recorded digitally. Everything had to be recorded on tape and through a console and all that stuff. Like, so that's going to happen too. If we ever get some big thing AI taking over, it's going to swing back the other way. I mean, the entertainment industry just it does these ebbs and flows, and it just repeats itself too over long periods. If you zoom out long enough, it just repeats itself. So.
Good plot for a horror movie there, an audiophile horror movie. Everything's made digitally.
I don't care. I'm fine with digital. I've never been a snob when it comes to that.
So that kind of actually segues into a question I had. Besides the whole AI nonsense, and I realize we're almost at 2 hours, so let's try to probably cap it there. And if you guys have been enjoying this discussion here with myself, Mark, Tim, and Nick, make sure you smash the like button and throw in a super chat if you want to. Go to spatialcd.com, pick up a disc, support the channel and what I'm doing here. And so where do you see the format at? Where do you see Atmos in the next 5 years, 10 years? What do you guys see for the horizon?
I personally don't think it's going to change much, right? I really do think Home Atmos was released almost 10 years ago next month, I think. I think that we're, just as we lived with 5.1 for 20 plus years and we lived with stereo for 20 plus years, I don't think things are going to change a lot. I just think it's the ubiquitous way to deliver content. And I think you'll see more things like room virtualization and all those other things that are coming down the pike. So Sony's doing something really cool with something called VME. There's a company called Smythe that makes something called the Realizer. Like those are room emulators, and you'll start seeing head tracking and all this other stuff. But I don't see for the format. I don't think we'll see. I can't see what we're going to see that will change artistically or gives us something different.
Okay. Well,
personally, I don't know, Tim.
No, I agree. I mean, I think Atmos has been here, like you said, for basically 10 years, and there's been some little adjustments to it, obviously, over the time. But these formats, they sit around for a while, but before anything new comes out. So I don't see any big changes in the near future on it.
Well, how about this? How do we get more fun mixes? Then I guess how is it just going to be like this? It's going to be like this for the next 10 years for home theater enthusiasts, right? Just we got to look for the right mixer for the right movie, and then just watch that kind of thing.
I think you're finding
that the up and coming guys will the new guys in the business will be listening to the right stuff and delivering stuff that is more like what we're after and not just like watered down.
No, there are people like Jeremy Davis. There are a bunch of up and coming people that you'll definitely start seeing much more of this stuff. And again, I'm not the old guard. I'll call myself the old guard. And I've been doing this for 34 years, and Tim's been doing this for less than that. But we get hired because we have a lot of experience, and people trust us to do their $100 million broadcast shows. And there's something about that, right? They don't listen to our Atmos mixes. They go, these guys they're competent and they're good they're easy to deal with and all that. So yes, I think it's going to take there's a new generation that is swiftly coming up through the ranks, and I think you will start seeing it on things like what you mentioned about Jeremy's show, and you'll see it. There was a great show a couple years ago on Netflix called Black Summer. It's a really spectacular mix, and you'll start to see that. And I can also tell you that I had a meeting. I can say this at Netflix a couple weeks ago, and Netflix is very. They are taking. That is their concern. They're spending all this money, and they would also like there to be "quote unquote" better and more immersive mixes, and they're taking an active role in that. So you'll start to see it.
And I feel like there's some of their stuff is some of the best stuff, you know. I mean, a lot of people I haven't watched it yet. I know the reviews aren't too great on the movie itself, but that new Atlas movie is supposed to have a killer Atmos mix. You know, a lot of the best, you know, stuff is on Netflix as far as Atmos mixes. So that's and we know Apple
Borders. Bo Borders mixed Atlas, and he also mixed Gran Turismo. And
Gran Turismo,
and that's another. I haven't watched it yet, but it's
great movie.
I know that's supposed to be a reference Atmos mix. I have the disc, just haven't watched it yet.
So again, you can go, Bo. You don't expect anything less than Tim LeBlanc mixed dialogue and music on Atlas. Anyways, yes, you can expect it from these people. So I think it's changing, and I think part of the problem too is we have also been in a period where we've had a lot of retro stuff that's been remixed, and again, you're kind of coming from your hands being tied a little bit, and I think we're just starting to see. I think things are getting better overall.
Yeah,
right.
In my opinion,
and don't you think too? Like going back to our other conversation too about like the headphones. If you're a Dolby Atmos fan, you have to root for like the stuff like headphones and sound bars and virtualization. You have to, even though that's not what we want as home theater people, because we're still listening on speaker systems, but like you have to root for that stuff to succeed, because that's what's going to keep the format around for, you know, the everyday people that are going to get a chance to get into this, you know, so that the, you know, we as that are in this niche can enjoy this great content. You know, we need to root. It's like we don't want to listen to Atmos on headphones, but we really need to root for that to work, you know, if we want it to succeed. And we want to keep listening to Atmos, because otherwise the format will die without widespread adoption. And I think we've already seen that, like you just said, Netflix has got a ton of ton invested in this, and they're actively trying to, you know, make it a big deal. And Apple has got a ton of money invested into this. Like when you've got big players like that, I mean, Netflix is really the only success. I think they're the only streaming company that actually turns a profit on their streaming, you know? So like they're, you know, when you've got those two big giants behind it, I mean, that's why I think it's like the format should be, it's in good hands. You know, it's got a lot of money behind it.
Yeah.
And it's not the worst thing in the world, I think, if things really don't change for a while, at least for us as home theater consumers, because we don't have to worry about upgrading, you know, because some new format comes out.
Well,
I mean,
you know,
because how long was True HD around? I mean, that came out in like right when True HD and you know, Master Audio came out. Yeah,
what was it?
But
like,
that was it was basically 2006, right? When Blu-ray came out. So that had about a, you know, I mean, yes, it's still being used, but it had, you know, a little less than, you know, 10 years before Atmos, you know, and DTSX started to come into the picture. So, you know, if we're at 10 years now and something new really hasn't come up yet, I think that's actually kind of nice for the consumers to not have to worry about upgrading. So,
yeah. When I was at the Mix Immersive event in Santa Monica, March, February, something like that. All the old guard, Jimmy Jam, and what's it?
Lewis,
Manny
Jimmy
Marquine. Yeah, Jimmy Jam from
Minnesota.
They were talking about the up and coming producers, the up and coming mixers that are going to, you know, be, you know, start with Atmos, and they are excited for what the future would bring. But you know, I still think it's a little ways off as well. You know, maybe 5-10 years, where, you know, everybody's just going to be in this experimental phase. So maybe we're just a little too early.
I kind of think
we're a little too early. You know,
and
I feel like on the
really quick. Oh, no, I wanted to clarify something they're talking about in the chat about Netflix adopting 916 and all this. What he's saying is correct. Netflix changed their preferred monitoring spec from 714 to 916 for mixing stages. What they prefer to have people being able to listen to on the mixing stages, and they just changed their reference room to that. So that's what it is. Again, with Atmos, it doesn't matter. All the shows I've mixed in Atmos, Carnival Row and Sympathizer, they've been mixed in 714 rooms. So again, you have to remember, it doesn't matter. I still put stuffs in the wides, even in the 714.
Yeah, it'll scale
room.
up, when you go up
Yeah.
to objects. That's what's great about Atmos. The objects will scale up to whatever it's.
It does show that Netflix is definitely, they're trying to push the content creators, being Tim and I, to start embracing this a little bit more. And I'm telling you guys, like, there's things I can't talk about, but they're really heavily invested in making sure their Atmos content is.
That's good to hear.
Yeah,
is Atmos. They're spending a lot of money on it, and yeah.
Now when it's front wides going into 5-year level speakers, that's when things get a little dicey.
That's a whole thing.
That's another 2-hour conversation. So thank you guys so much for everybody here who's watching. I think we got up to like 100 people a little while ago. Yeah, awesome. So any parting words, Mark, Tim, Nick? Anything else you want to say, promote, divulge secrets?
I mean, I'll just break the ice on that. Like, I will say, if anybody's watching, if you're a fan of Chana and you like the mixes that he does, like I said, I recently got started mixing in Atmos. I've got, just one mix out already, and I'm doing it very similar to Chana, where I'm putting it out available to download for free with the, Atmos viewer on the screen, with the renderer, I should say, on the screen. So if you like what he does, go check my stuff out. You probably will like it. And yeah, I'll be having a lot more, Atmos mixes coming along down the pike. So
yeah.
And just thanks everybody for being enthusiasts. I mean, I can say I've been on AVS since 1999, I think, or I don't even remember how long I've been on AVS, like 25 years or whatever. Might even be longer, whatever. But the enthusiasm and people pushing, and really that really has served me well in my career, right? I want to make sure that we all do it because we love it. So I'm thankful for all that, and thanks for all the great questions. I've been trying to read a lot of the stuff in the chat too, and I'm glad that people are really engaged, and I really appreciate everybody spending their couple of hours with us.
Yeah, everybody's saying thanks. By the way, Nick's YouTube channel, there's a link to that in the description of this video, so you guys can go over there and check that out. He also did a little 714 quick check.
Yeah, like a little quick calibration file, so that, like, if you want to just test that you've got your speakers hooked up right, that they're, I always just put it on, like, I like just OCD about it. I like to put it on before I just play about any movie. It's like, just make sure all your speakers are plugged in. But it's also good if you want to, I've got a little thing on there. It'll test how low your subs can go. So I've just got where it does some bass drops getting lower and lower with the EQ on, with the analyzer on screen.
Sure,
so you can see how low your subs play. And if it's just got a real quick level match where it does pink noise on all 11 speakers, just stays on each one for about 3-4 seconds. So it's just kind of a quick level match, but it's just a nice handy file that I've got there for free if you want to download. But I always say, if you want, I'd say this in the video too, if you want more stuff like that or more detailed stuff, definitely go check out the Spatial Audio Toolkit, because that's got everything you can need there. This is just like a really quick and easy, thing you can do. So
yeah.
And thanks, Jana, for making this channel and doing these things. I think it's awesome. And I'll speak for Tim, but I would love to do more of these. So
yeah. Okay. Well, no, let's have Tim speak. Tim, go ahead. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mark. I'll speak for myself as well. No, I appreciate you. Thank you for having me on, and love the questions and the interest from everybody. And this is a lot of fun.
Yeah. No. Let's. I'm gonna end the stream, guys, but don't leave the studio. We talk for a few more minutes. But yeah, I know somebody says, Darren, this is so great. Can't believe I found this channel. Hey, the channel's been here since 2016. Go ahead, subscribe up. I got like over 800 videos. So yeah, you just go down that rabbit hole of YouTube. And yeah, thank you guys so much for being here. This is another
really
episode.
Fun. Thank you for having us on.
Oh, dude, I'm
a blast.
loving it. I am loving it. I wasn't just here fielding questions all for 2 hours. Usually it's just me. I have to go through like 4 glasses of water, just non-stop talking. So this is great. And I can't wait to do it again. On behalf of my guests, Tim, Mark, and Nick, we will see you guys later. Thank you all for hanging out in the chat. And again, you guys here, don't hit leave studio. Okay, we got to talk. And I don't know when I'm going to do the next live stream. But I don't know. By the way, if you are in the California area, go check out. Me and Joe are going to be at The Show in Costa Mesa, June 7, 8, 9. We will be, it's a 2-channel audio show, but we will have a 7.1.4 Atmos room. We will be selling toolkits, and we will be showing off his calibration magic beans. I have 2, 3 brand new Atmos mixes that nobody's heard yet, and we are going to be debuting them at the show. So make sure you go down there and check it out because they are awesome. Hey, you're gonna love this. It's some cool ass shit. I'm so stoked. I found these stems randomly.